There you go.
Welcome to today's webinar, Exploring Modern SCADA. My name is David Blanco, and I will serve as moderator and make a few short opening remarks. We appreciate everyone's time and attendance today. So our agenda for today is going to be, first, I will introduce myself as well as AUTOSOL. Then Trent and Steve will introduce themselves and their role at their companies. Then we'll have about 45 minutes of discussion, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A from questions that you submit. On the top right corner of the screen that you see right now, there should be a chat icon with a question mark. Click that to submit any questions. Throughout the webinar, I'll be reading them to then answer them at the end. So my name is David Blanco, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations and Business Development here at Automation Solutions. I've been with AUTOSOL since about 2011. And AUTOSOL is a software and integration company. Our main flagship piece of software is called AUTOSOL Communication Manager, or ACM. This is a multi-protocol polling engine that does real-time as well as historic or EFM collection from RTUs and PLCs in the field back to a cloud or server, and then onwards to HMI, published OPC, or CFX files, Flowcal, etc. And we also do integration of Schneider Electric products such as SCADA. So there's a good synergy between AUTOSOL's products, the polling engine, and Schneider Electric's HMI. Trent, would you like to introduce yourself in your role here at AUTOSOL?
Yeah, so my name is Trent Franklin. I'm the operations manager of the SCADA group here at AUTOSOL. I'm responsible for a team of engineers that does all of the integration of the AUTOSOL product, and then, as you just mentioned, the SCADA product. Also manage, I guess, the development and integration of some products that we've built internally within the group as well, SCADA, LinePack, and Hydrocarbon Dew Point. And we'll get into those a little bit more later, I'm sure.
Steve, would you like to introduce yourself and your role?
Yeah, certainly. My name's Steve Beadle, and I am the SCADA program manager at Schneider Electric. Note that I say SCADA and not SCADA, because I'm from the UK, and also on my business card it says distinguished expert, and that's not just because of the grey hair, but because I've been around in this business for over 30 years. Firstly insert controls, and then what became it was purchased to become SCADA Group, and then Schneider Electric. I've closely worked with our SCADA product. Previously it was called SCADA, but we've had a name change, and that reflects our functionality and our place in the marketplace. You will find me a real enthusiast and evangelist for SCADA. I really enjoy it. It's got a lot of me in it. Yes, I'm bigging myself up, but it's fantastic, and you'll hear more about that as we go on.
Looking forward to it. Thank you both. So I'd like to start off this discussion and kind of say what I hope to do with this, discussion, I should say. I really want to bring into focus several emerging trends that we see in the remote SCADA industry, such as the cloud, MQTT, and IIoT. I feel like oftentimes these topics are presented as Industry 4.0 or even labeled as modern SCADA. And in that labeling, there's oftentimes an implication that newer is better. But in the industrial space, I don't necessarily agree with that case. I think better in the industrial space means performing my core processes faster, safer, and getting more output with the same or less input. Building modern SCADA isn't really a story of rip and replace, but enhance and embrace, of growth. What we built is great. It's doing what we need it to do reliably and safely, and now let's make it better. And AUTOSOL and Schneider have a very strong working partnership, with AUTOSOL's ACM being able to feed data reliably to Schneider Electric's SCADA. And this discussion will leverage the experiences that we both have with that relationship. So we'll be able to speak from experience on what is true modern SCADA versus what is modern SCADA marketing. And so with that kind of contextualization of the discussion, let's get right into it. So one of the things I enjoy most about SCADA is that you meet a lot of different people from different backgrounds and who've lived a lot of different lives. I have built systems and worked with people who were teachers, veterans, police officers, liberal arts majors. And so, Steve, this first question is for you. Can you give us a little bit about you and your background, and how did you get involved in the SCADA HMI industry?
Yeah, well, I started out with effectively what was kind of a university apprenticeship at the General Electric company, who were managing protection relays and high voltages. And for me, I was soldering computers together, and anything above 5 volts scared me. So what I really wanted to do was get into computers. And in joining what was the telecontrol division of that company, and then following that CERT controls, I was riding the wave of water privatization and utility privatization. And that, for me, was sort of my first, I was a C programmer, I was the real geek, and I've loved it ever since. Just a few things about that, though. The industry that I was in was all about monitoring systems, super reliability, always on, and scalability to hundreds of thousands of points. And that brought me from water into oil and gas, and in the UK gas transmission and distribution systems. And I thought all SCADA was like this, but it turns out that it wasn't the case. Over the years, I've learned more about what other SCADA systems do, and there's quite a variety out there. And I call many of them pocket SCADA systems because they're great for home automation and bottling plant, but they're never going to cut it in the enterprise, where you need something that is going to be super stable and will grow with you. And I'll talk a bit about that as we go on, but I'll stop now.
Yeah.
Trent, what about you? How did you get in the SCADA industry?
So hardly as exciting of a story as Steve's. I finished graduating college. I got my computer engineering degree, and I spent probably 6 to 8 months looking for a job shortly after school, and applied at hundreds of places probably. Similar story to most of the people that graduate, and ultimately ended up applying for a job where the qualifications were completely different. It was all mostly programming related requirements, not so much hardware, which is what I went to school for and kind of what I wanted to do. The expertise, though, lent itself well for the segue into what I'm doing now. I ended up getting a job here, and I was already kind of familiar with SCADA because I've got some family that was involved in the electric industry. They do DB administration, database design, screen design. One of them's a control room manager for an electric company, so I had those associations already coming into it. And fast forward 9 years, here I am still today, and that's my story. What about you?
Oh, well, I find that the old slogan for realty, location, location, location also works for SCADA. So I was working for a software company an hour and a half from my house there, hour and a half back, and there's no radio station, CD, or podcast I want to hear for 3 hours a day. So one day it just kind of snapped. It was a Tuesday, and I wanted to work closer to home. So I Googled my house, zoomed out, found the closest office building, applied to every company in that building, and by that Friday, I was at Automation Solutions. And I've been a happy, productive employee since, and that was back in 2011. So that's a little bit about me. So this next question here is for Steve, and this is kind of meat of the conversation here. So let's talk about GeoSCADA. Can you kind of give us an idea at how GeoSCADA has grown over the years to help us better understand where it sits in the industry today?
Well, I said earlier that GeoSCADA does things differently. I'm talking your way now.
Potato, potato.
The product has always been live configuration, that when you make a change, like add a new comms channel, a new point, a new device, it just carries on working. And that, when it came to the market as a shrink wrap product in the early 2000s, it was a revolution. And there are many other features that it has that are also still revolutionary now, such as the historian is fully built in. We actually made it support 100 years of history because we needed to make it support products that were going into the environmental industry, where they were doing weather forecasting and weather history. We include still a world-beating templating system for doing configuration of the system in a really optimum way to save effort in not only creating a system but maintaining it. And that theme of innovation is part of that long-term relationship that I have with it, my colleagues have with it, and our customers have with it as well. That we are constantly bringing out new things, pushing new boundaries, but still going back to those core values of reliability and stability and scalability. And what I like to say is that it's a system that doesn't require any programming to achieve thousands of features, literally thousands, but also it does support programming and you can do thousands more. It's that great balance. It's not, like some systems are very code heavy or some are too simplistic. Some of our competitors I definitely put into both of those two camps. But for example, you could customize the alarm lifecycle behavior with just a few clicks. Nothing else touches it.
Yeah. And I think the thing that you mentioned there is kind of what helped me getting into the product. When I first started using what was then ClearSCADA and GeoSCADA, that was 9 years ago, which was well into AUTOSOL's involvement with the product. I think around 2005, 2006, we were integrating as a company, integrating with other software, and our involvement with certain customer bases was at the time starting to grow from what was a small customer base to a larger, we'll call it enterprise customer. And the evolution of how AUTOSOL has grown really fit in well with the evolution for how we interacted with ClearSCADA. At the time, the HMI that we were using didn't really check all the boxes. It wasn't as flexible as we needed. We couldn't grow it to the capacity of the system that we needed. Using ClearSCADA, we were able to do all of that. And GeoSCADA now, that trend continues. It's simple enough for end users or users who have no programming expertise to be able to do, like you said, pretty much anything they want. But then it's also complex enough to allow users like ourselves as integrators to really leverage the product as more of a platform than an application and build things like what we have now, SCADA, which we've seen a lot of success, and that's really where the growth for us has come as a integration shop. And then LinePack and Hydrocarbon Dew Point, they all reference the .NET API that's in GeoSCADA. It's very powerful. And a lot of the functions that you guys probably use within the application, we're using as well to use our applications. And for us, having the product kind of grow with us, and we feel like, just like you do, there's a part of you in the product, there's a part of us in the product. It kind of feels the same way.
Thanks.
Well, with with that context here, I think it's a good point now to turn to the present and the future, right? So why are people, and this is for either one of you who would like to answer, so please, whoever's fastest, speak. Why are people turning to GeoSCADA as their HMI platform? What is it providing them now, and what does that roadmap for the product look like?
I'm going to start by saying cloud is one of the key differentiators. We, as a GeoSCADA product organization, we are the original IIoT. We offer the scalability and live configuration that the Cloud IoT platform requires. We might have some different terminology from some other players in the marketplace. Others might say provisioning, we'd say configuration, or digital twin versus the other features that we do, like raising alarms and so on. But it's those core values of performance and connectivity and simplicity that enable us to be migrated into the cloud. And we've seen customers move almost without us knowing into cloud, and others, they come to us and say, well, how do we get the best out of it? How do we scale up? It's easy to shift in or start in the cloud. And it's not a tangle of scripts like many cloud IoT solutions are. You can imagine trying to use Node-RED for SCADA with all of its squiggly lines and boxes. You could never scale that truly, whereas you can really do that with GeoSCADA.
Yeah. So Steve kind of took the question first because he talks faster than me. But you know, for us as a integration shop at AUTOSOL and myself personally, I mean, you echoed the simplicity of it earlier, and I'll kind of hit on that again. The need for additional configuration or scripting for certain things is just not there. You have a built-in historian, built-in configuration changes, event logs, audit changes, all these things that are kind of packaged into one application. And I think for an end user where there's a lot of systems that are very, I'll call them modular, where they might have to piecemeal things together to get the full thing working properly. This is a application that everything is kind of self-contained. And for somebody like myself 9 years ago when I started, having that to grow with and learn from, you know, I thought all SCADA was supposed to be like that, and frankly, it should. They should all be simple to work with. They should all have all this stuff out of the box for them. But then there's other things that extend beyond that, which, from an operational standpoint, are, I think, what a lot of our end users have seen success with versus using other systems, and that gets into things like upgrade process and downtime. You know, we have a lot of customers, and I'm sure almost every customer, their goal is 99.9% downtime. I mean, minimum. You know, everyone wants to shoot. Everyone wants to uptime. Excuse me. Yeah. So everyone wants to shoot for 100%. But you know, the reality is, I mean, there's patching and you know, server migration, stuff like that happens, and GeoSCADA really makes it easy for that. I think when I first started, it was around the same time David first started, and he's probably got an experience that he could share there.
Yeah, I guess to kind of tie what you and Steve have both said together, I know I had been at AUTOSOL for about probably a month and a half, where it was my sink or swim moment. So I'd done the documentation, I'd done the training, I'd poked around on the forums, and I was sent to a client site to go and update their servers, and I was able to do it having just read the manual, and it was all very, I guess, built in, right? They had a hot standby pair with a DMZ server, and I was able to just follow the documentation myself and get it all done easy peasy. So I found it very, I guess, a very easy HMI to get involved with, and it was also my first. Like Trent said, I think I have 1 day of seniority over him, and that's it. I started the Friday, he started the Monday.
Yeah, I mean, we've always been proud of that facility to be able to upgrade without losing data, without having downtime. You just upgrade one machine, click a switch on the keyboard, upgrade the other machine, and it just keeps running. And in fact, the users, they don't even need to know that it's going on. They might get a small screen blink, but they don't have to log in again. All their screens stay open. It just carries on working. It's the original Duracell bunny.
There you go. Yeah, I think what's most telling about it, though, is that oftentimes customers will call and ask for like upgrade procedures for how do I go through and stand up a new system or add a server or upgrade from 2015 to 2017 to whatever the latest revision is, and that process is documented. The best strategy for getting to whatever version you're at is documented, and I really could send instructions to a user and give that to them and have pretty good confidence that they're going to be able to get through it themselves. A lot of them would like us to be a part of it, and of course we're going to help wherever we can, but I would say more often than not, a customer is more than capable of leading that process themselves.
Excellent. Yeah.
And I guess just to add a little more of a personal touch here, I know that one thing that I did enjoy about, I guess, working with GeoSCADA was the support and the community on it. And so with that, I kind of want to lead into, I guess, my next question here. And that is, what role have integrators played? And this question's for you, Steve. What role have integrators played in the development of GeoSCADA's, 1, features, and then here's a loaded part, 2, market position?
Yeah. Well, we have had for many years user groups across the globe, UK, Australia, in the US and Canada. We've have, I think you call them CABs, customer advisory boards. We have also have internet forum, and that really helps us listen to what customers need to do. And of course, we have the support mechanism, and that's used to receive feature desires as well. So we get all of that information, and that helps shape our roadmap. But with integrators, we have to do more than just provide features, if you like. We actually have to provide the feature to enable features. And that's where we provide our programming interfaces, for example, for bulk configuration or special calculations or custom drivers. So as an example of that, for gas transmission and distribution in the UK, we provide an API that enabled our integrator to translate 40,000 legacy mimics from their old SCADA system into the GeoSCADA format. I mean, just imagine how many, well, thousands of person days that saved them in the engineering time. And it's things like that that really help people like you have a lovely day.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tack on to that question as well, and kind of follow along that same line. So where you have integrators that are, we'll call them power users of the software, that are able to write their own applications. You know, we have our SCADA application where we've had numerous situations where a customer would call and say, hey, I've just bought this site or these assets from somebody, and they're cutting the switch soon. So I gotta be able to integrate these assets within my existing system, and I've got 2 weeks to do it. So the tools that are built in there allow you, I mentioned earlier, to kind of build applications around it. The platform is there, and our SCADA tool that we were able to build over 2,000 well sites within that 2-week period. And that's only one example of it. You know, we've got another example where there was another HMI that was in use at one of our customer sites that years of development had gone into it, and it was just not performing as well as they thought it was going to be performing. It wasn't finished, and within probably a 1 to 2 month period, we were able to get up to that bar that they were at, and then eventually surpass them, and that's now one of our best customers. So those success stories are part of our culture here, and it's important to know that those tools are available to you in that software. And when it comes to support in general, as integrators, you know, for us, I see us playing the role of almost like a filter, if you will. So we get the bulk of the end user support calls, and we take those calls, and by the time we get those calls and funnel them into the Schneider support group, they're already kind of sifted through. We've kind of taken the low-hanging fruit out, and most of the time when we call, it's because it's usually an issue in the software. And it's an ongoing joke here that you know, anytime I call or one of my colleagues call, I could feel on the other end the support is like, oh God, it's Trent again, and that they know that whatever it is, it's going to be an issue that they're going to have to escalate, and it's going to be a 1 or 2 month or week period where you know, it's out of their hands. So it's that kind of relationship, I feel, is the role that we have to play. And what I will say is that the most rewarding thing, though, is like when you see release notes or something and there's a issue in there, and that issue is a ticket that we've submitted as integrators. That's a very rewarding thing. It's like, that's my issue, and the other thing is, what I will say is that the support there is absolutely fantastic. And from the time that I started here, that's 9 years ago, there are still some folks that are on the support group that were there at the time I started, where I was just battering them with really silly questions. And how do I do this? How do I do this? When I could have just read a manual. You know, they're still there today, and they are the ones that take these heavy questions. So yeah, you know, I kind of feel like
valued, don't they? They're
yeah,
hugely valued, and really, you know, I can't speak of them highly enough, but to actually hear your experiences, it's like panning for gold. You know, you are there, and you're moving the pan around, and these little nuggets start appearing, and that they turn up in the product, and that's a great story to hear.
Yeah, and what I'll say is, I think I've said it before, but it kind of feels like we're not family, but we're like Olive Garden family, where I could sit across the table from the support group, and we can have a conversation as if we know each other, just because we've built that relationship, you know.
Olive Garden, you'll have to tell me about that. It doesn't compute for me.
So I kind of want to shift it a little bit to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, Steve, that I want us to dive a little more into, and that is the cloud, because I also see, I'm sitting here reading some questions. We've got the cloud being mentioned more and more, so I want to give the people what they want. And in both of y'all's opinion, from, I guess, both sides of the product, right? As the product creator, Steve, and then as the integrator, Trent, how do you see GeoSCADA fitting into clients' cloud architectures? Why are people moving? How is GeoSCADA performing there? And what is GeoSCADA doing, I guess, more than just your traditional SCADA? How is it helping modernize SCADA?
Okay, I'd start by saying that it's a business as usual thing, that we have customers, particularly some gas distribution customers who have moved into Amazon. We've also got customers that have moved into Microsoft Azure, and it's really exciting to see the extra things that they can start to do with this now. So we've got one of our big customers in the Northwest. They are outputting data to Cosmos DB. We've got others using Amazon Redshift and Microsoft Power BI. It's an exciting time to be in SCADA.
Yeah, and to kind of follow up on that, you know, for us, we're seeing kind of when it comes to the cloud, a hybrid approach of things. So there's I feel like there's still a lack of comfort for a lot of people to have, you know, their actual host SCADA systems in the cloud. So what we're seeing is the host SCADA systems is local, and then they'll have a Azure server or a cloud server up in the cloud. And that's what they're using to perform analytics. They'll use it as a data warehouse. They'll use it for other applications to feed data off of. So it's not really like the whole system is getting there. I think that's the progression where things are going. And as people get more comfortable with that, that's absolutely where it's going to go. Just because of what Steve said, it unlocks a world of possibilities that are right now not impossible, but difficult to do. Resource allocation and balancing, that kind of thing. An example of where you know, we've seen this already is we have customers that have plunger lift sites or rod pump controllers, and they've got thousands of points that they're looking at on these things for optimization purposes. So they'll use GeoSCADA as kind of a bridge to have that data pushed to a data warehouse or to another server. And then internally here at AUTOSOL, you know, we're trying to stay at the cutting edge, and we have a product called EACM that sits at the edge to locally pull all of the information. We could buffer the data, send a lot of data upstream to a broker, which then disperses it to any number of clients wherever they're going to go. And that allows us to be leaders in this position, because we're still pretty early on, I think, in the space of where do other people view the cloud and how am I really going to get the most benefit out of this? And that creates opportunity ultimately for us to try to figure out what's the best use case.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that both of y'all made. And Steve, I guess I just kind of want to confirm something here about the GeoSCADA and the cloud, because I think I heard a rumor, because I'm plugged into the GeoSCADA rumor community. I think I heard a rumor that there was a pipeline or some kind of large service company in the UK that recently moved over to the cloud with GeoSCADA, and I didn't see much fanfare. So it kind of seems like the cloud is just, I mean, it's just part of how it operates, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I can't name them, but we keep our cards close to our chest there. But absolutely, yes. And well, it went with a whisper, really. So we're very pleased about that.
Those are always the best kind of installs.
Yeah.
So I would like for y'all to elaborate a little more on what Trent just said about basically this moment being an opportunity for leadership, right? Because you've got the cloud, and then there's, as I think Trent put it, you've got people who are doing it because they can, and people wondering if they should. How do y'all see that playing out with kind of the broader IIoT push, right? So 25, 30 years ago, you bring in 15 points from one PLC or one RTU, and now you're bringing in 2,200. So the amount of data that people are demanding is really pushing this innovation that we're seeing. what are y'all's experience with it from a performance or maybe just handling clients' needs standpoint? How do you see GeoSCADA fitting into the broader IIoT future?
Yeah, well, certainly with scalability, our server architecture in a single server will support up to 1 million points, and then you can federate multiple servers together. And maybe if you have 50 servers, then you've got 50 million points. So there's some room for us all to grow into that. But you're right, devices are getting bigger and more complicated. There's more and more data. We've gone from 15 tags to 2,200 for a particular type of site. And that's going to accelerate. It's not showing any signs of slowing down. And in part, this is because the opportunity for analytics is only there if you've gathered the data.
Right.
And we don't really understand or fully appreciate yet how that data is going to be used. But put it out there, and sure as eggs are eggs, people will find some scope for finding value in it.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned there is, I think that's the most important point. There is the data. It's somebody will care about that. It might not mean that much to us. It might not mean that much to an operator, but to the person that is trying to extract as much out of this well as they can, they need that data to be able to figure out how this thing should be configured and to be able to make the educated insights into what we should do to control this thing. The data is there, and I kind of mentioned earlier the EACM product having the ability to push those data points up, whether it's on an interval, you backfill it, you do dead bands. That's a very powerful thing. And when it comes to the scalability of a product, an operator might not need all 2,000 or 3,000 points into his SCADA system, but that enables us to have the 3,000 points taken from the field, pushed it up, and then you can have the GeoSCADA application pull down the 20 or 30 alarms that operator really cares about. So it's really just business as usual, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Steve. I mean, it's understanding what you have and then trying to figure out how to fit that puzzle together in the equation that you got.
Yeah, but I think you've made a key point there that we're also seeing different paths and routes for data.
Yeah.
So there's critical data for alarms, and then there's non-critical data for measurement and performance. They might even use different protocols. So it might be non-critical through MQTT to analytics, critical through DNP3 and Modbus and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Steve, your last comment there kind of points to one of the big shifts in how SCADA systems are used, especially when it comes to IIoT, and that is that the clients consuming the data are changing. I know that at least here at AUTOSOL, we will set up a 500,000 tag system, and then they'll immediately make an ODBC connection to some other business unit, which was, of course, not in scope, not designed for. It handles it, but it's just always interesting to see how many other applications, processes are built around this data. And I think that that's what kind of the cloud is helping us. I think you mentioned plugging into Azure and plugging into Power BI is we're able to maintain the existing structure of data transmission while also serving these other clients.
Yes, well, our historian has got sort of fire hose links that can squirt data out, and that's just the kind of thing that you need for putting out into the cloud.
Yeah.
And you mentioned MQTT, so I will take this opportunity to pivot. And I want to ask you, as a man who makes HMIs, from a man who works for a company that makes a software that uses protocols, what is, in your view, GeoSCADA's relationship to protocols? When do you say, okay, we're going to include this protocol, but not that one?
Well, I think you could divide it into three categories. For us, there's the standards, the traditional Modbus DNP3, and slightly newer OPC, OPC UA, and MQTT. Then equally as important, our own devices, which use those standards, but also have additional programmability. For example, integrated upload and download of configuration, automatic firmware installation. So there's the extensions for our own devices. And then thirdly, protocols which are popular. And we've mentioned MQTT. MQTT is not a protocol. It is a transport for getting messages from one place to another. Works in a rather different way from traditional ways of doing it. But it is a carrier for a format of data, which could be Spark-Plug-B, it could be WITS IoT, it could be JSON. And what we've done there is to actually put in a framework for MQTT and then a plugin architecture where we've started with the JSON format and we shall be adding Spark-Plug-B and other things in future. So we like to do the big ones, but we absolutely need yourselves to do those specialized protocols, for example, for, I don't know, you name them.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the protocols that Steve was mentioning there, I mean, in the oil and gas space, that's where we sit, and that's where our expertise lies, whether it's ROC, total flow, I mean, FBNet, I mean, all these protocols, we're capable of pulling natively and then converting it to some other form, whether it's OPC DA, hopefully soon OPC UA, that's on the roadmap, and it looks like that's going to be coming sometime early next year. And then already available now in a beta format is MQTT. So, having those export formats available, I feel like that is really the bridge, because the truth is, I mean, you're going to have devices that are in the field that are going to be legacy devices for probably forever. The reality of having an end user or an enterprise company go out and rip out all these devices and put in IoT compatible RTUs, it's just not realistic. And then let's say you do have a greenfield customer that has that, they can start off on that route, but what if they end up purchasing assets or they get bought out? Well, now they're having to have this merge or mesh of both approaches. So you have to have that bridge, and that software allows you to do that. And having the output of MQTT, as you mentioned, is that data transport for the one-to-many in a very efficient way. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, great scope there.
So we've got a lot of questions built up here, so I want to be sure that we get to some of them, because some of them are pretty thought-provoking. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up some of this discussion here. So I've got a couple last questions for you here, Steve. The first one here is, as the father of GeoSCADA, what are some of the underutilized features or use cases of GeoSCADA that you want people to know more about?
You flatter me. One of the fathers, I would say, one of the many.
Very
highly skilled and respected people. Yeah. Well, I think that someone said to me the other day, you can't do a distributed architecture, can you? Oh, you can? Of course we can. We support master and slave protocols within the device. We can use web services. We can make a hierarchical system. And I'm beginning to see that a bit more. The built-in alarm redirection system. There's no need to buy another system that might redirect, because we already have redirection to voice now, and SMS and emails. And we also surprise people with some of the data analytics features, the Dynacards and XY plots being some examples of our visualizations of data. But also we've got a calculation system for forecasting. We can take historic data, do some analytics on it, and throw that forward and raise alarms in the future. How about that? We have a built-in time machine in the product.
All right, thank you. So what are you currently working on that you are excited about, that makes you eager to go to work every day?
Oh, well, loads of things. Spark-Plug-B is one of them, though, that we're currently working on a technology trial of Spark-Plug that we're actually going to publish open source and allow people to try and play with. And that will take a radical approach to self-configuration and templating. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of a splash that makes. The control room is changing. It has been changing for some time, and we need to do things like this, we need these rapid fail, rapid succeed things to improve our product. And I'm really excited to see what myself and some of my colleagues are going to do in the future.
All right, so with that, I think we'll go ahead and start taking some questions. And again, for those of you who have not yet submitted a question, we have 39 questions currently. Again, in the top right corner, you can click maybe right here, and there'll be a little chat box with the question mark. So one that stuck out to me a little early, and yes, I am sorry, I am reading them in order that they appeared, is I like this one a lot. What do you think about MQTT as an IIoT protocol compared with other IIoT protocols like OPC UA?
MQTT has a particular publish-subscribe model that is very strong, but it has, at least for Sparkplug, no clear way, not a reliable and 100% way of showing the presence of a device. And I think with UA, you get that because you're online, you're offline. I think also the control of scanning for MQTT is entirely under the control of MQTT, if you like. Whereas with OPC UA, you've got the ability to have synchronous and asynchronous data. So there are attributes to both. I wouldn't say that one is better than the other, they're just different. And I think we're going to see some exciting ways in which both of these protocols are going to be used.
Trent, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what Steve just said. I mean, and what's interesting is OPC UA now has a pub sub model that's similar to, I guess, in a sense, what MQTT is providing. But that extra layer of security is I think what's appealing to a lot of folks. They're different inherently, and you have to really evaluate the use case for what is the purpose of what I'm trying to achieve here. I mean, it's kind of in a short QA session, there's a lot of ways that answer can go.
Yeah, one of the particular attributes of both really is that they both support metadata, information about what you're reading. Ranges and units and things are possible ways of using both of those protocols. Things like building the alarm limits into the protocol are all possible because of the way that they can support metadata. So it's been really exciting to see how that gets used in the future.
Yeah, I know that from my experience, at least in the past 2 years here, the biggest difference I've seen between MQTT and OPC UA is, in particular, with retrieving data from the field. So AUTOSOL has an edge version of ACM with, wait for it, called Edge ACM. Spend a lot of marketing on that. And what that does is basically it does protocol conversion in the field and then brings that data back to your server. Using less bandwidth, you can get higher resolution data on the points that matter. And that is where I really feel MQTT is the game changer, because MQTT is really good for those low bandwidth many-to-one relationships. If I had a server-to-server, cloud-to-cloud communication, I would go with OPC UA. But if I'm doing a many-to-one distributed network feeding back to the cloud, I think that MQTT does a great job not only of managing the multi-clients that we're talking about, but also of just keeping the traffic lower, because it can do that report by exception. Yeah. And that's just from my experience as well. Any other comments, guys, or can I go to the next question?
Nope, let's go on. Yep.
All right, so now that we already all have our heads in the cloud, I like this one. I like this one because it's not friendly. What are the constraints of having GeoSCADA in the cloud? And that is from our friend Anonymous.
Lovely. I think if something's running on bare metal, then you can squeeze a bit more performance out of it. So, but if something's in the cloud, then you just push a few buttons and you can move it to a more powerful server. But I think it's interesting to think about the total cost of ownership, both the running costs, the deployment costs, and if you're starting from scratch, why not go into the cloud straight off? Because the engineering costs are a one-off. But having been on the ground for some time, the migration process can be quite interesting because you've got to think about the security of it, which is different from the security that you've previously had to design. You've got to think about how the communications from devices get into the cloud in a reliable and secure way. And you've got to really understand the redundancy model offered by the cloud providers. And it's not sufficient just to run up two machines because you don't know physically how dependent they are on each other. So you have to specify whether they're in different zones, availability zones. So yeah, there's lots of decisions and interesting choices.
Yeah. And I guess from my standpoint, I'll take it from the opposite end of kind of hitting on some of the high points and giving an example of where we've seen it implemented successfully, where I mentioned earlier kind of a hybrid model where you have, local servers here and then you have a cloud server. The cloud server could be, SCADA has a new feature called Virtual VueX, and the Virtual VueX is a HTML5 based server client, does virtualization for the clients that are accessing the software. If you were to put that kind of a session up in the cloud, having dynamic resource allocation to be able to load balance your users, I think is a excellent use case for something like that. And we've got one customer that's currently looking into that, and if it's successful, and I don't see why it wouldn't be, we would take that route for some other folks as well, I'm sure.
Yeah. Kind of pay-as-you-go approach to loading. I
don't think I quite understand this question, but I keep looking at it, so I am
going
going
to
understand ask it. Yeah, so I'm going to ask it here. This is from our friend Steve, and it says, SCADA collects a huge amount of data. Where do you see SCADA extending into providing actionable information for clients? So I won't do any interpretation on that question. I'll just ask it because I think it's pretty open.
Yeah. Trent first, I think.
Yeah, so I think actionable information, that to me sounds a lot like how can I create analytics or insights into the data that I'm pulling, and if that's not what you meant, I apologize, but that's the direction I'm going to take my answer. So I mean, SCADA has a number of tools already internally in the application for you to write, whether it's a logic program, a calculation, a robust calculation engine for you to take inputs and create outputs based off of values. Steve mentioned earlier that you can literally predict the future using forecasting. So there's a lot of things that you could do, and then the best part about it is the history is all there as well. And there's so many things that you could do with the history to be able to roll up hourly averages, 5-minute averages, 3-minute averages. You can create your own historic algorithms to be able to say, okay, this is the data over the last 3 months, and I'm going to try to run some sort of processed historic algorithm against this information and do it for hundreds of points within a query, output that, use that in calculations. I mean, there's hundreds of different ways that you can create actionable insights from the data that you're collecting. The catch is you have to have the data, kind of like what we were mentioning earlier, and how it gets there, whether it's from MQTT, OPC, that's up to what your infrastructure is and how you really architect your system.
Yeah, I mean, I was demonstrating to a customer the possibilities the other day of a data feed out of SCADA to an AI system, which was then making its decisions and feeding results back. Yeah, and there we have to think about resilience and redundancy and what it means and all the rest of it. But in coupling SCADA with systems making advanced decisions, where could you take that?
Yeah, the one thing that I will say is it's kind of a touchy subject when you talk about creating the actionable insights based off of the data that you have, or actionable items. You have to really, you're running a fine line between what should my field devices be doing and what should I be doing. We can take the information and make, let's use an example of ACM, for example. We have all this information about how your communication infrastructure is performing. we can take that data and based off of poll success rates, we can switch you to a secondary channel if your devices are enabled for that. We have OPC items that would allow us to configure something within ClearSCADA or GeoSCADA to do that. But if you're saying, well, the system's performing like this, so I'm going to start optimizing the well and sending controls, that's not really something I want my SCADA system doing. That's something that, or my HMI rather, that's something that should be done from a PLC or an RTU or something that's local in the field and has that information.
All right. The next question here is going to come from a gentleman named Rodrigo, and it reads as such. Have you set an application using weather forecast in GeoSCADA?
Yes. Yes. I've seen it in more than one industry as well. So certainly I see weather information being fed into GeoSCADA itself for oil and gas, and particularly for gas demand sort of analytics, so that you could say, well, it's going to be a hot day or a cold day and we'll have to take action accordingly. But more specifically in wind forecasting for renewable energy generation, and also in flood forecasting for environmental monitoring, and also in rainfall will also change the way that yes, sewage, dirty water, that'll change the way that that you need to react to the alarms in a SCADA system for wastewater. So yeah, weather, I've seen what people use our maps, for example, to overlay weather pictures, but also take weather data such as the sort of dividing up the land into a matrix of squares and then plotting how much rain goes onto each section. So yeah, I've seen a variety of different techniques.
And Trent, I feel like you just successfully rolled off a project where you utilized the map feature of GeoSCADA. Did that include weather?
The mapping feature, yes. We're not doing anything with forecasting per se, but I mean, we did bring in a layer of weather data onto the map just to show them kind of what's going on. You could bring in like cloud cover on top of the map, and maybe you've got spotty comms in an area and you pull up the clouds and oh, lo and behold, you're in Houston and right now it's pitch black outside. Well, that's probably why. Maybe I'm on satellite or something, and that's the reason for it. So the mapping feature, absolutely. We did just get done rolling that out for a customer, and I think they 2,000 or 3,000 devices when you add in all their odorizers, chromatographs, stuff like that onto the maps. But it's a lot of data points that you're plotting, and having that insight was valuable to that customer. And the other thing that it did was it allowed them to get rid of another application, because it's one more thing that GeoSCADA had out of the box that they didn't need another app for.
Yeah, great.
And I'll kind of throw, I don't have as much experience developing this platform or integrating it as either one of you, but I did, some would say, dabble in it for 7 years prior to my current role. And there's another question here from Alan that I would like to comment on, both his question as well as dovetail with this one, and that is, actually, I guess it's more of a statement, but I think it's a good discussion topic. This is from Alan. It says, Trent, you said before with the applications you've developed like OneSCADA and LinePack, and you were able to leverage the .NET API. Can you speak more on that? I can tell you this, I am not trained as a developer. I have a number of liberal arts degrees. So if you would like to know something about the Protestant Reformation, hit me up on LinkedIn. But I was also able to do some applications. So I know that for one client, I wrote an application that would compare nominations for a pipeline to weather today and the weather patterns in the past 5 years that would match it to help them predict whether or not they would hit nominations. So that was done with a combination of API scripting outside the server that would feed data in via some website where the government puts weather data, and then scripting within a screen of ClearSCADA. And I'm sure that Trent has another of a lot of different stories like that, but I think that is a big source of innovation. Someone else also asked a question of how is ClearSCADA future-proofing themselves. I think this is a good way to shove that in here too, is not so much future-proofing, but future planning. So Steve thinks that clients will need to innovate, and they have. I'm sorry, trying to keep talking over you. Please go.
Oh, no, I mean, it sounds like you're on a roll. I was just going to kind of echo your sentiment and get back to the question that he asked about specifically LinePack. I mean, so the .NET API, we have a number of applications that tie into it, whether it's for GeoSCADA here or for ACM. Our core product for integration here is OneSCADA, and that allows us from a common single interface to be able to connect to the API in GeoSCADA, connect to the API in ACM, and maintain, build, create, clone, create new devices. Make the changes, and you can, from a single pane of glass, hit a button and it will create devices on both systems. So those kinds of tools, it's a platform that allows you to do a lot of different things. And it doesn't just start or stop at configuration. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff with the information depending on what your use case is. I think Alan had another question in there too, a little bit further down about historians and stuff. And we have customers that have built applications that tie into the API to pull history for migration into other things as well. GeoSCADA has a lot of things out of the box, though, like the HDA interface for exporting to Pi, to another Aviva historian like eDNA or the OneWare historian. Those interfaces have direct ties into the GeoSCADA product to be able to pull that data.
Yes, at very high performance too. Yeah, but I mean, just a few more examples of the programmability, and I've just seen over the past few years, pipelineware, for example, implementing that is directly in GeoSCADA, or people on site, planned maintenance, procedures or handling the procedures with buttons on the screen mimics and graphics that handle someone making a scheduled visit and running through the safety processes, and then the site leaving procedure, making sure the right processes have been followed. So yeah, all sorts of ways in which little bits and pieces, or sometimes large applications, are plugged in.
Yeah. So I think we probably have time for one more question here, and let's see, there's so many to pick from. Here's one. So in the future, what protocol do you think will dominate the industry, if any?
Oh, what a difficult question.
Yeah, that is loaded.
Should I pick my favorite?
Yeah.
Well, I like OPC UA, and I like DNP3, and I like MQTT as well. Particularly, you know, I like Sparkplug B. I think it's got some great features. There's a new protocol coming out of the UK called WITS IoT, which has got a lot of the things that are missing out of some of the other protocols, but we've yet to see how much traction that will gain. Yeah. I am not going to pick a favorite because I think we need to get on all of these horses and ride them.
Yeah, and when I hear that question, I can only think to myself, you know, what flavor of ice cream is the best? And the answer is, well, they're
tutti frutti.
Subjective. It's subjective, and it depends on the situation. It's like, I like mint and chip ice cream in the summer, but not in the winter. So, when you think about it that way, it again just depends on the use case, how much data is going, where's it going, how many clients are receiving it. So there's not really a good answer that is this is the protocol of the future. And then just over time, I mean, new things pop up. So.
Yeah, I think if you ask what modern SCADA is, it's eclectic. It talks lots of different protocols.
Exactly.
It's scaled. It can go big. It's ontological. It knows about the meaning of things, and heterarchical in that it works and lives in an environment with lots of interconnected things.
Nice. So it looks like we are out of time. So before we leave here, Steve, I would like to ask you, how can audience members reach you if they have any more comments or questions?
Well, I'm available on very few social media channels, but I love handling emails, and so there's an email address that gets my attention and my colleagues as well, as I'm afraid, working 24/7. But yeah, get in touch. We love to talk, we love to write, And when some of this thing blows over, we love to come and visit you and shake your hand and talk about SCADA or SCADA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will share now a slide here that will let people know how they can also reach us if they have any more questions or comments that they'd like. Schneider Electric at geoscada@sc.com. AUTOSOL, please call 281-286-6017 to speak to myself, Trent, or any other of our experts on SCADA here at Automation Solutions, or reach out at sales@autosoln.com. I promise we'll just talk. We won't only send quotes. And I guess before we leave, I kind of want to wrap up some of our thoughts here into a nice little package, maybe a soundbite. And that is, I think that modern SCADA is not necessarily about predicting the future. It is about planning the future. And one of the things that struck me the most about the conversation we've had today is that GeoSCADA is an integrated platform, not only in the sense that it has a number of built-in features like the historian, et cetera, into it, but it also integrates into the cloud, as well as with other programs through its API. There's also a solid support community around Schneider Electric, and support, in my mind, takes two forms. The first form is for the basics. How do I start my server? This isn't working, bug fixes. And the second is for innovation. Okay, yeah, I know that this is probably not what it was intended to do, but, and I think that's where a lot of the future proofing of GeoSCADA will come in, and that is that it will respond to those innovative support calls. And then, of course, the cloud, it's not just for the people who think we could. It's also for people, sorry, it's not just for the people who think that they should. It's for people who think that they also could. Sounds like there's a lot of integration on that platform and a lot of connectivity into other analytics programs that we maybe quite haven't unlocked the full potential of in the industry yet. So lastly, I would like to thank everyone for their time and attendance today. Special thanks to Steve Beadle for staying up late and doing this conversation with us. And of course, thank you to Trent Franklin as well for offering your time. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.